The radio crackled with static, then silence. The kind of silence that meant someone was already dead or about to be. In the operations center at Bagram Airfield, a dozen eyes fixed on the same grid coordinate, watching it blink red on the tactical display. The SEAL team callsign Red Fish 6 had gone dark 3 minutes ago, deep in the Korangal Valley, where the mountains swallowed radio waves and spit out body bags. The mission controller, a captain with 2 combat tour and permanent worry lines, reached for the comm switch. His hand hesitated. There was no fast air available. The F-16s were refueling over Kandahar. The Apache gunships were grounded for maintenance after yesterday's rotor malfunction. The nearest AC-130 was still 4 hours out, circling a different hellscape entirely. On the screen, the red dot pulsed like a dying heartbeat. 6 American operators, pinned down somewhere in those godless ridges, with Taliban fighters closing in from 3 directions. The captain's throat tightened. He'd have to tell them no one was coming. That's when Lieutenant Kira Voss walked into the TOC, flight suit unzipped at the collar, helmet bag slung over one shoulder. She moved with the unhurried confidence of someone who'd already made peace with worse outcomes. Her eyes, pale gray like winter sky, scanned the room and landed on the display. She didn't ask what was wrong. She could read crisis in posture and silence. The captain glanced at her, then away. Voss had a reputation, not the kind that got you promoted. She flew A-10 Warthogs, the ugly, slow, outdated tank killers that the Air Force kept trying to retire. She'd been flying close air support missions for 9 months, and the stories about her were contradictory, unsettling. Some said she was reckless. Others said she saw things in the air that other pilots missed. Her call sign was Requiem, which nobody used to her face because nobody knew if it was meant as respect or mockery. She'd earned it after a mission in Helmand Province, details classified, where she'd stayed on station long after her fuel should have forced her home. The JTAC on the ground that day said her gun runs were so precise, so relentless, that it felt like listening to a dirge for the enemy. The name stuck. Now she stood there, reading the room's despair, and asked the only question that mattered. How far out are they? Her voice was calm, almost soft, the kind of tone that made people listen harder. The captain blinked. Red Fish 6, 43 miles northeast, but Voss, there's no. I'm wheels up in 5. She turned toward the door. The captain stepped forward. Lieutenant, you're not scheduled for patrol. Your bird's loaded for training runs, not combat. You don't even have a full combat load. Voss paused at the threshold, her back still to him. The overhead lights cast her shadow long across the concrete floor. When she spoke again, there was no anger, no bravado, just a simple, immovable fact. Then I'll make every round count. She disappeared into the Afghan night, leaving the captain staring at the empty doorway. In the corner of the TOC, a specialist whispered to his buddy, "Isn't she the one they grounded last year?" The other shook his head. Suspended, insubordination, flew a mission after command told her to abort. Why? Some Marines were surrounded. She figured saving them was worth the paperwork. Outside, the wind carried the distant whine of a turbofan engine spooling up. The A-10 Thunderbolt II sat on the tarmac, ugly and purposeful, its nose painted with teeth like some predator from an older, meaner war. Voss walked the pre-flight by instinct, her hands moving over panel edges and ordnance pylons, checking what she already knew was ready. The crew chief, a staff sergeant named Melina, jogged up beside her. "Ma'am, I heard the chatter. You need me to reconfigure the loadout." Voss shook her head, eyes tracing the lines of her aircraft. 4 Sidewinders she wouldn't need, 2 Mavericks, 500 rounds of 30mm high-explosive incendiary in the nose cannon. Not enough for a sustained fight, but enough if she was smart, if she was lucky. "It'll do," she said. Melina hesitated. "They said there's no air support available." "There is now." Voss climbed the ladder, settled into the cockpit, and began the startup sequence. Her hands moved across switches and dials with the muscle memory of 3,000 flight hours. Outside, Melina watched the engines come to life, the smell of jet fuel mixing with desert dust. He'd seen plenty of pilots fly off into bad situations, but something about the way Voss sat in that cockpit made him uneasy. Not because she seemed scared, because she didn't. The A-10 taxied toward the runway, its silhouette ungainly and low to the ground, a machine built for violence at close range. In the cockpit, Voss ran through her checks one final time, then keyed the radio. Bagram Tower, Requiem 11 requesting immediate departure, priority traffic. The tower controller's voice came back hesitant. Requiem 11, confirm you have mission authorization. Voss didn't answer right away. She pushed the throttles forward, felt the twin turbofans surge, the airframe shudder with restrained power. The runway lights stretched out before her like a lit fuse. Requiem 11 is rolling. The controller started to protest, but she was already accelerating, the nose lifting, the wheels breaking contact with the earth. The A-10 clawed into the night sky, wings heavy with ordnance, and disappeared over the dark spine of the Hindu Kush. In the TOC, the captain watched her transponder blip move northeast toward the red dot, toward Redfish 6, toward something that would either become legend or another name on a memorial wall. Someone muttered, "She's actually going." The captain stared at the screen, then reached for his coffee, cold now, and took a sip. His voice was quiet, almost to himself. "Yeah, she is." The mountains waited, indifferent and ancient. Somewhere in their folds, 6 SEALs crouched behind inadequate cover, counting ammunition and praying for a miracle they'd been told wasn't coming. And above them, closing fast through the darkness, flew a pilot most people had already written off, carrying a gun that sang in 7-note bursts. The Korangal Valley earned its nickname the Valley of Death the old-fashioned way, one casualty at a time, one convoy at a time, one illusion of safety shattered by a single rifle shot from a ridge nobody thought mattered. Redfish 6 had been inserted 12 hours earlier under cover of darkness, their mission straightforward on paper. Locate and confirm a high-value target, observe patterns, extract before dawn. Intelligence suggested minimal enemy presence. Intelligence was wrong. Senior Chief Marcus Hale lay flat behind a boulder the size of a compact car, pressing himself into the earth as rounds snapped overhead with that distinct crack that meant they were close, inches close. His breath came measured despite the adrenaline. Beside him, his radio man, Petty Officer Gutierrez, worked the handset with increasing desperation. "Any station, this is Redfish 6, troops in contact, requesting immediate CAS, how copy?" Static answered. Then a voice, distant and crackling. "Redfish 6, Bagram TOC. Be advised no fast air available your location. Nearest asset is 4 hours out. Recommend you break contact and move to alternate extract." Gutierrez looked at Hale. They both knew what that meant. Recommend you run. Recommend you abandon the mission. Recommend you survive if you can. Hale keyed his own radio, speaking to his team scattered among the rocks. "All Redfish elements stand by for egress on my mark. Moving downslope, 300 meters, rally point Delta." His second-in-command, Lieutenant Cade Oren, responded immediately. "Senior, we've got at least 30 dismounts moving up the draw. If we leave this high ground, they'll flank us before we make 100 meters. Hale closed his eyes briefly. Oren was right. They were pinned on a ridgeline with deteriorating cover, ammunition running low, and an enemy force that knew the terrain better than any satellite map could teach. Moving meant dying faster. Staying meant dying slower. Those were the options. Then Gutierrez grabbed his shoulder. "Senior, I've got a call sign inbound. Solo aircraft not on the flight schedule. Says she's 12 minutes out." Hale frowned. "She. Call sign Requiem, flying an A-10. Someone laughed, short and bitter. The A-10 was a legend in these mountains, but they were rare, often pulled for maintenance or reassigned to other theaters. And a pilot coming in without authorization in the middle of the night into one of the deadliest valleys in Afghanistan. That was either insane or something else entirely. Hale took the handset. "Requiem, Redfish 6, what's your loadout and fuel state?" The voice that came back was calm, almost clinical, with a slight southern accent softened by military precision. "Redfish 6, I'm carrying 2 Mavericks and 500 rounds 30 mic. Fuel state is acceptable. Send your situation and enemy disposition." Hale felt something unclench in his chest. Not relief, not yet, but possibility. "Requiem, we are 6 personnel, pinned on ridge designated checkpoint Viper. Enemy force estimated 30 dismounts with heavy weapons, moving up draw from our west and north. Danger close, I say again, danger close. We are 30 meters from nearest enemy position. Silence on the radio, long enough that Hale thought the connection dropped. Then, understood, danger close. I'll need your mark, strobe or IR. IR strobe coming up now. One of his teammates activated the infrared beacon, invisible to the naked eye but brilliant through night vision. High above, Voss saw it immediately, a pulsing star against the dark landscape. Her aircraft was screaming northeast at 300 knots, low enough that the terrain radar was painting constant warnings. She'd switched off most of the automated safety protocols. They only slowed her down. Through her heads-up display, she watched the thermal overlay resolve into shapes. Hot spots clustered in a draw moving uphill. Smaller signatures cooler, stationary on the ridge. Red fish 6. Voss rolled the A-10 into a banking turn, eyes scanning the landscape below. The Coringal at night was a tapestry of shadows and stone, ancient and hostile. She'd flown over it 24 times, but never like this. Never alone. Never without backup or tanker support waiting overhead. Her fuel gauge read lower than she wanted. The combat load was light. The odds were not in her favor. She keyed the radio. Red fish 6, Requiem. I have your position and multiple thermal signatures west and north. Confirm you want fires on the draw. Hale pressed himself tighter against the rock as another burst of PKM fire raked across their position. One of his teammates grunted, hit in the plate carrier, bruised but alive. They were out of time. Requiem, that's affirmative, clear to engage. Voss didn't respond with words. She nosed the A-10 down, felt the airframe shudder as speed built. The targeting reticle in her HUD settled over the heat signatures in the draw. She thumbed the trigger. The GAU-8 Avenger cannon, the most violent piece of machinery ever hung on an airplane, roared to life. 7 barrels spinning at 4,000 rounds per minute, each 30mm shell the size of a milk bottle, erupting from the nose in a stream of fire and physics that defied mercy. The sound reached the ground a second after the impact. It wasn't a bang or a crack. It was a sustained, guttural bellow, like the earth itself tearing open. A sound so distinct, so primal that everyone who heard it knew exactly what it was. The sound of the warthog. On the ridge, Hale watched the draw below light up with muzzle flashes, then erupt in explosions as the 30mm rounds walked through the enemy positions. Dirt and rock and worse things flew into the air. The incoming fire stopped. Just stopped. Gutierrez stared, mouth open. Holy. Voss pulled up hard, the G-forces pressing her into the seat, and banked around for another pass. Her eyes never left the thermal display. Some of the heat signatures were gone. Others scattered, running. She adjusted her angle, led the movement, and fired again. The cannon sang its song. 60 rounds, 70. She counted in her head, rationing what little she had. Down below, the enemy force that had been advancing with confidence now broke and ran. But they weren't running away. They were regrouping, moving to flank from a different angle. Voss saw it before they completed the maneuver. Red fish 6, you've got dismounts moving east along your ridgeline. Estimate 1-5 personnel. They're trying to get above you, Hale swore. If the enemy reached the high ground to their east, Red fish 6 would be caught in a crossfire with no cover. He keyed the radio. Can you engage? Negative, too close to your position. You need to move now. Hale made the call. All redfish elements, displacement drill, move east, bounding over watch. Go! The seals moved like shadows, 2 covering while 4 advanced, then revering, a choreographed violence that kept them alive. But they were still exposed, still vulnerable. Voss watched from above, her jaw tight. The enemy was faster than she'd hoped, already repositioning. She had 1 Maverick left and maybe 200 rounds. Not enough. It was never enough. She armed the Maverick, locked onto the largest cluster of heat signatures, and fired. The missile dropped away, its motor igniting, and streaked downward in a white-hot arc. It impacted in the center of the enemy formation, the explosion briefly turning night into day. When the smoke cleared, the thermal display showed fewer targets, but they were still coming. Voss felt the weight of the decision settle over her. She could make 1 more gun run, maybe 2, and then she'd be out of ammunition. The nearest refuel point was 30 minutes away. Redfish 6 didn't have 30 minutes. The calculation was simple, brutal. She could stay until her gun was empty, then fly home and hope it was enough. Or she could leave now, rearm, and return. But they'd be dead by then. So it wasn't really a choice at all. She keyed the radio. Redfish 6, I'm Winchester in 90 seconds. After that it's just me and the airframe. There was a pause, then Hale's voice steady despite everything. Understood, make them count. Voss didn't reply. She nosed down into another gun run, dropping like a falcon toward the chaos below. The targeting reticle settled. She fired. The cannon roared. The remaining rounds tore through the enemy position, each impact a small apocalypse of metal and fire. She counted down in her mind. 100 rounds. 70, 40, 20. The gun went silent, the barrels still spinning, smoking in the cold mountain air. Her ammunition counter read 0. She pulled up, her hand steady on the stick, and climbed back into the darkness. Below, the battlefield had gone quiet. The enemy, what remained of them, had scattered into the rocks, retreating, regrouping. Redfish 6 held their position, breathing hard, checking for wounded. They'd survived, for now. Gutierrez looked at Hale. She's out of ammo. Hale nodded slowly. Yeah. So what now? Before Hale could answer, Voss's voice came over the radio, calm and matter-of-fact. Redfish 6, I'm going to orbit your position until extract arrives or my fuel runs out, whichever comes first. Hale stared up at the dark sky where he couldn't see her but knew she was there. A guardian without bullets circling above them. He keyed the radio, his voice rough. Requiem, you can't do anything without ordnance. You should RTB. There was a long silence. Then Voss spoke, and her voice carried something that wasn't bravado or pride, just a simple, unshakable truth. They don't know I'm Winchester. Long as I'm overhead, they'll think twice before moving on you. In the TOC at Bagram, the captain listened to this exchange, his face pale. The operations officer beside him leaned in. Sir, she's going to run out of fuel before any extract bird gets there. The captain nodded. I know. She'll have to punch out over hostile territory. I know. We can order her back. The captain looked at the screen, at the blip representing Requiem 11 circling over the red dot of Redfish 6. He thought about regulations and chain of command and all the reasons he should make that call. Then he thought about 6 men pinned in the mountains and a pilot who'd already decided their lives mattered more than the paperwork. No, he said quietly. We can't. Above the quadrangle, Voss settled into a wide orbit, her eyes scanning the ground. The A-10 handled like a truck, heavy and stable, and she flew it with the kind of intimacy that came from thousands of hours in the seat. She checked her fuel gauge. 20 minutes, maybe 30 if she leaned the mixture and prayed. The enemy knew she was up here. They'd seen what the gun could do. They didn't know it was empty. Perception was a weapon too. She keyed the radio to Redfish 6. You boys comfortable down there? Hale almost laughed. Oh, it's a real resort, 5 stars. Good, sit tight, help's on the way. It wasn't entirely a lie. Somewhere someone was scrambling a QRF, coordinating an extract. The machinery of rescue was in motion. It just wasn't moving fast enough. Voss flew her circle, patient and relentless, a scarecrow made of titanium and turbofans. Below, the enemy watched the aircraft circle and made their calculations. The Warthog was still there. The gun was still a threat. They could wait. And so the standoff held, suspended in the thin air above the valley, a game of nerves and fuel gauges. In the TOC, someone plotted intercept times. The nearest extract helicopter was 40 minutes out. Voss's fuel would be gone in 25. The math was unforgiving. The captain stared at the screen and felt the weight of command like a physical thing pressing down on his shoulders. He couldn't order her home, but he couldn't save her either, so he did the only thing left. He watched. Voss checked her fuel again. 18 minutes. Her hands didn't shake. Her breath stayed even. She'd known the odds when she took off, and the odds hadn't changed. She thought about the men below, their names she didn't know, their faces she'd never seen. She thought about the last mission in Helmand Province, the one that earned her the call sign and the reputation. She'd stayed on station that day too, long past prudence, because leaving felt like betraying something fundamental. Her instructors at flight school said the A-10 was a pilot's airplane, unforgiving and honest. It didn't have the speed to run from a fight or the stealth to avoid one. It was built to get low, get dirty, and absorb punishment meant for the people on the ground. Flying it required a particular kind of faith. Not in the machine, but in the idea that some things mattered more than self-preservation. She'd understood that from her first flight. Some pilots never did. 15 minutes. The radio crackled. Requiem Bagram TOC. We have extract assets inbound your location. ETA 35 minutes. 35 minutes. She ran the numbers. It didn't work, not even close. Copy TOC. Thanks for the update. She didn't say what they both knew. Didn't waste time on words that wouldn't change anything. Instead, she tightened her orbit, dropped lower, making herself visible. Let them see her. Let them know she was still here, still watching. Below, an enemy commander crouched among the rocks, frustration boiling in his chest. The American plane circled like a vulture, taunting them. His men were scattered, demoralized. 3 had been killed, more wounded. The infidel soldiers on the ridge were trapped but protected. He grabbed his radio, barking orders. They would wait for the plane to leave, then attack. His lieutenant hesitated. What if it doesn't leave? The commander spat into the dirt. It will, it must. Planes cannot stay forever. But this one did. 12 minutes of fuel remaining. Voss felt the first flutter in the engine response, a subtle hesitation that meant the tanks were getting low. The turbofans would run until they didn't, and then physics would reclaim her. She glanced at the ejection handle between her legs. She'd never pulled it in combat, never wanted to. But the training was muscle memory. The procedure was clear. The survival odds after ejection over hostile territory were not something she wanted to calculate. 10 minutes. Hale's voice came over the radio. Requiem, what's your fuel state? She almost lied, then decided he deserved the truth. Low enough to matter. You need to get out of here. Not yet. That's an order, Lieutenant. Voss smiled despite everything. A Navy SEAL trying to give orders to an Air Force pilot. The chain of command had become beautifully irrelevant. Sorry, Senior, I can't hear you. Radio's breaking up. She switched frequencies before he could respond. The night pressed in around her, vast and cold. The stars above were crystalline, indifferent. The mountains below held their secrets. She was alone in the way that only pilots understand, separated from the earth by speed and altitude and a fragile shell of aluminum and titanium. But she wasn't afraid. Fear was for people who still believed they controlled the outcome. 8 minutes. The low fuel warning light illuminated on her panel, a calm amber glow. She acknowledged it with a glance. The A-10 flew on, steady and true. In the TOC, the captain stood with his arms crossed, staring at the screen. The operations officer had stopped trying to suggest alternatives. There weren't any. Everyone in the room understood they were watching something that would either become a story people told in hushed tones or a classified after-action report buried in a filing cabinet. Specialist in the corner whispered, "Why doesn't she just eject now and get it over with?" The captain heard him, turned. His voice was quiet but sharp. "Because those men down there need to believe she's still armed. The second she punches out, the enemy knows the gun's gone and they'll overrun that position before extract arrives. She's buying time with an empty aircraft in pure bluff." The specialist blinked. "That's insane." "Yeah." The captain turned back to the screen. "It's also the only place she's got." 6 minutes. Voss's hands moved across the controls with practiced ease, adjusting trim, maintaining altitude. The engines hummed their steady note, not yet showing distress. She thought about her father, a Marine Corps pilot who'd flown Hueys in Vietnam. He died when she was 16, an accident during a training flight, the kind of random mechanical failure that killed without drama or dignity. At his funeral, an old gunner from his squadron told her that her father once stayed on station over a surrounded platoon until his fuel ran dry, then auto-rotated the helicopter down into a hot LZ rather than leave them alone. They gave him a medal. She kept it in her locker. 4 minutes. The radio crackled. A new voice, female, urgent. "Requiem 1-1, this is Dusk 7-2. We are inbound hot to your location. ETA 15 minutes. Voss closed her eyes briefly. 15 minutes, so close, so impossibly far. Copy Dustoff. Be advised possible hostile fire on approach. Recommend high and fast until confirmed clear. Roger that, we're coming regardless. Voss felt her throat tight. The medevac pilots, the Dustoff crews, were a different breed. They flew unarmed helicopters into hell because someone needed them. No guns, no armor, just stubborn courage and a red cross painted on the fuselage. Good hunting, Dustoff. Redfish 6 will be ready. 3 minutes. The first engine coughed. A subtle miss there and gone. Voss's eyes snapped to the gauges, fuel pressure dropping. She had minutes now, not many. She eased back on the throttle, stretching what remained. The A-10 slowed, the orbit widening. Below, the enemy commander sensed something. The plane was flying differently, slower. He stood, peering up into the darkness. His lieutenant spoke urgently. "Now, do we attack now?" The commander hesitated. The plane was still there, but something had changed. He could feel it. 2 minutes. Both engines running rough now, the turbofan starving. Voss ran through the emergency procedures in her mind. When the engines quit, she'd have glide time, not much but some. She could aim for flatter ground, maybe clear the immediate combat area. The ejection seat would work. The parachute would deploy. And then she'd be on the ground in hostile territory with a sidearm and a survival radio, hoping someone could reach her before the enemy did. 1 minute. She keyed the radio one last time. Redfish 6 Requiem, I'm going to need to step out for a bit. Dustoff is 12 minutes out. Stay low, stay tight, you're going to make it home. Hale's voice came back immediate, raw. Requiem, got him it, eject now while you have altitude. Working on it, senior. Tell Dustoff my beacon will be east of your position approximately 2 clicks. I'll try to make myself available for pickup. She said it like she was running to the store, casual and certain. The engines quit, both at once. The sudden silence was total, profound. The cockpit alarm screamed warnings she already understood. The A-10 became a glider, heavy and graceless, trading altitude for distance. Voss scanned the ground, looking for anything that wasn't vertical cliff or enemy position. There. A relatively flat section of ridge, maybe a half-mile east. She angled toward it, the stick heavy in her hands. No hydraulics, no power, just aerodynamics and prayer. The ground rose to meet her faster than she wanted. She ran the ejection checklist in her head. Canopy, seat, 3 seconds of violence and hope. Her hand found the handle, she pulled. The canopy blew away with an explosive crack. The seat rocket motor fired, a brutal acceleration that crushed her down, then flung her up. The world spun. Sky, stars, mountains, all tumbling. Then the parachute deployed, jerking her hard, and she hung suspended in the darkness, swinging beneath the canopy. Below her, A-10 hit the ridge and disintegrated, metal and fire scattering across the rocks. She watched it burn, this machine that had carried her through 3 deployments and 100 missions. Then she looked away, focused on the ground rising up. She hit hard, rolled, the parachute dragging her across the rocks. She punched the release, fought free of the harness, and lay still for a moment, breathing hard, checking for injuries. Nothing broken. Everything hurt. She keyed her survival radio. Any station, Requiem 11 is down and evading. Position approximately 2 clicks east of Redfish 6. The response was immediate. Multiple voices overlapping. Dustoff 7-2, Bagram TOC, Redfish 6, all converging on her signal. She didn't have time to feel relief. She heard voices. Pashto, close. They'd seen her shoot. Voss low-crawled into a crevice between 2 boulders, her sidearm drawn. The voices grew louder. Flashlights swept the rocks. She controlled her breathing, slowed her heart rate. The enemy moved past her position, searching. She counted 6 of them, maybe more, beyond her line of sight. Her radio hissed with static and whispered voices coordinating her rescue, but she didn't dare respond. Sound carried in these mountains. One of the searchers stopped 10 feet from her hiding spot, his light playing across the rocks. He muttered something to his companion. They laughed. Voss's finger rested on the trigger guard, not the trigger, not yet. Shooting would give away her position. She'd save the bullets for when hiding stopped being an option. The searcher moved on. Voss exhaled slowly, silently. Above, she heard the distant thump of rotor blades. Dustoff 7-2 inbound, and something else. Heavier, faster. She risked a glance skyward and saw them. 2 Apache gunships running lights off, thermal sensors painting the mountainside. The cavalry had arrived. The lead Apache's pilot spoke over the radio, voice calm and professional. Requiem 11, Python 3-1 has you visual via thermal. We count 8 dismounts within 50 meters of your position. Stay down, we're going hot. Voss pressed herself deeper into the crevice. The Apache opened fire. The 30mm chain guns, different from her beloved GAU-8 but no less effective, ripped through the darkness. The enemy fighters scattered, some returning fire uselessly, others simply ceasing to exist. The engagement lasted 40 seconds. When it ended, the mountainside was quiet except for the rotors. Dustoff 7-2 flared over Voss's position, the side gunner providing cover as the crew chief jumped out. He ran to her crevice, hand extended. "Ma'am, time to go." Voss took his hand, let him pull her up. They sprinted to the helicopter. Inside the cabin, Hans pulled her aboard. The helicopter lifted immediately, banking hard, gaining altitude. Voss sat on the floor, her back against the bulkhead, shaking not from fear but from adrenaline finally catching up. The crew chief handed her a headset. She put it on and immediately heard Hale's voice. "Requiem, Red Fish 6. We are secure and loading extract now. Thanks for the air show." She keyed the mic, her voice hoarse. "Anytime, Senior. Sorry I couldn't stick around for the whole thing." "You stuck around plenty. We owe you a beer, several beers." "I'll collect." The flight back to Bagram took 30 minutes. Voss sat in silence, watching the mountains pass below, the same ridges and valleys she'd flown over 100 times. They looked different now, or maybe she did. When the helicopter landed, a crowd had gathered on the tarmac. Word had spread. The operations officer met her at the door, his face unreadable. "Lieutenant Voss, the colonel wants to see you immediately." She nodded. She'd expected this. Unauthorized mission, violation of protocol, destroyed aircraft. The paperwork alone would be impressive, but she'd do it again. Would do it tomorrow if necessary, because some things mattered more than regulations. The operations officer walked her toward the TOC, but as they passed through the gathering crowd, something unexpected happened. Someone started clapping, then another, then everyone. Slow at first, then building, a wave of applause that followed her across the tarmac. She didn't acknowledge it, didn't wave or smile, just kept walking. But inside, something shifted. In the TOC, the colonel waited, arms crossed, expression stern. He was a career officer, academy graduate, 2 stars in his future if he played it right. Voss stood at attention, ready for the hammer to fall. The colonel studied her for a long moment. Then he spoke. "That was the most reckless, insubordinate, ill-advised thing I've seen in 20 years." Voss said nothing. What could she say? He was right, the colonel continued. "You launched without authorization, flew into a hot zone without proper support, expended your ammunition and then stayed on station with no means of defense. You destroyed a $20 million aircraft." He paused. "And you saved 6 American lives." The silence stretched. Voss waited. The colonel uncrossed his arms. "Red Fish 6 submitted a recommendation for valor. The Air Force doesn't take those lightly." "Neither do I." He picked up a folder from the desk, handed it to her. "Consider yourself grounded pending investigation. Standard protocol. You'll be debriefed, evaluated, probably chewed out by several different chains of command." Voss took the folder. "Yes, sir." "That said," the colonel's expression softened just slightly, "off the record, that was some of the finest flying I've ever heard about. Stupid but fine." "Thank you, sir." "Dismissed." Voss saluted, turned to leave. The colonel's voice stopped her at the door. "Lieutenant, next time you decide to be a hero, try to at least bring the airplane back." She almost smiled. "I'll do my best, sir." Outside, dawn was breaking over the mountains, the sky turning from black to deep blue to gold. Melina, her crew chief, waited by the empty hardstand where her A-10 should have been. He looked up as she approached. "Heard you went swimming without your bird, ma'am." "Something like that." He shook his head. "Damn shame." "She was a good airplane." She was. They stood together in silence, watching the sunrise paint the Hindu Kush in shades of amber and rose. Voss thought about the wreckage scattered across some remote ridge, metal twisted and burned, the teeth painted on the nose blackened and broken. A warrior's end for a warrior's machine. Melina cleared his throat. "For what it's worth, ma'am, everyone's talking about what you did. Some are saying you're crazy. And the others, that you're the best close air support pilot in theater." Voss didn't respond. She wasn't interested in reputation or recognition. She'd done what the mission required, nothing more, nothing less. But as she walked back toward her quarters, she felt the weight of something settling on her shoulders. Not burden exactly, more like responsibility. A understanding that her actions had meaning beyond the moment, that the story of what happened over the Korangal would ripple outward, shaping perceptions and expectations. The call sign Requiem had meant one thing yesterday. Today it meant something different, something earned. In her quarters, she stripped off her flight suit, took a shower that was too short and too cold, and collapsed onto her bunk. Sleep came immediately, dreamless and deep. She woke 8 hours later to a knock on her door. It was the operations officer, Lieutenant